there, Jonny May here, and are you feeling stuck in your jazz improvisation? Like every time you improvise, does it sound like you're playing the same thing every time? Well, I remember when I was first learning jazz piano and my teacher taught me a really cool scale that I could use to improvise over a major chord, but every time I'd improvise, it just sounded like I was playing the notes from the scale. Okay? And one day I had a huge realization that instead of using the scale to improvise, I could use these hidden chords that come from the scale to create way cooler lines. And it took my playing to a whole new level. So in today's quick tip, I'm not only going to show you this hidden chord technique, but I'm going to show you the 3 steps that I recommend practicing these techniques with so you can start using them in your improvisations. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, in order to understand how to solo with hidden chords, you'll first want to start with a scale. And one of the best scales to use if you want to improvise on a major chord is called your Lydian Scale. Okay? It's like a C major scale, except instead of an F, you have an F sharp. Okay, this is called the Lydian Scale. And it's a really nice scale to get started with when you're improvising. And you can create some really nice jazz lines with this scale, but after a while, it's going to start to sound a little bit bland just playing the scale up and down the piano. So how do you break free from playing this scale up and down the piano? Well, that's what we're going to talk about next, but before we do that, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos just like this. Alright, so how do we take our playing to the next level? We use hidden chords, and the hidden chord sound is so cool. Check out what this sounds like. I'm going to play the exact same notes from the scale, the C Lydian scale, but I'll use hidden chords. Doesn't that sound awesome? And I literally played all of the notes from the C Lydian scale, but I did this really cool trick where instead of playing the scale up and down, I actually played chords that come from the scale. So what are these chords that come from the scale, or hidden chords? Well, here's the concept. If you take the notes from the C Lydian scale, and you start on the bottom note and you skip every other note, you end up with a C major chord. Okay? Now, if you did this on the D and you skipped every other note from the scale, you end up with a D major chord. And so instead of using the scale to improvise, you can actually use C major and D major to create lines. Doesn't that sound amazing? And I'm just using the C major chord and the D major chord. Now in jazz, we call these triad pairs. And triad pairs are basically 2 triads that come from a scale that sound really good when you're improvising with both triads together. Now, sometimes you can pick multiple triad pairs, but here's a quick little trick on which triad pairs to use together. Generally, the best triad pairs are ones that use completely different notes. So the C triad pair and the D triad pair are really good to use together, but I would not recommend using, for example, a C triad pair and an E minor triad pair because they share 2 of the same notes. Alright, so how do you actually use triad pairs in your improvisation? Well, you need to practice 3 different steps to master triad pairs before you can successfully use them in your improvisation. So here is step number 1, and step number 1 is to practice these 2 triad pairs using all of the inversions of these chords. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to play C major like this in root position, then a D major in root position. Then we're going to go up to the next C chord using the closest inversion. Okay, if we go up to the next C chord using the closest inversion, we have a first inversion C chord, and then we have a D major chord. This is a first inversion D major. Then our next chord is C major. That's going to be a second inversion C major. And then D major will be a second inversion D major. And then we're back to C major. All right? So what we just did is we practiced rotating from C major to D major using all of the inversions up the piano. And you might notice something really cool. If you look at the top note of each of these chords, you actually end up playing your C Lydian scale. So it's a really cool sound because you got that nice melody note on the top while you have the chord tones just underneath it. So that is step number one, is I recommend practicing C to D using inversions up and down the piano. You do want to try to build some speed as you're practicing these. You can also play them down the piano. Really useful. And as you practice this, I do recommend that you try using different fingering for each of the chords. In other words, I would try not to use all of the same fingers as you play these chords up and down the piano. All right, that's step number one. Once you're able to play these block chords or these chord inversions, step number two is to practice patterns up and down the piano. And the way a pattern works is very simple. You take each one of these chords and you break them up. For example, a very simple pattern, I could go bottom note, middle note, top note, middle note. And I could do this on each chord. So we go to the D chord, I go bottom, middle, top, middle. And then we go to the C chord and I go bottom, middle, top, middle. And then the D chord, bottom, middle, top, middle. Okay? Now this is a very simple pattern. I'm going to teach you a couple patterns that I really like to use in my improv, starting with this up pattern. Doesn't that sound amazing? And so what we're doing here is we're going to start on our C chord and we're going to go middle, bottom, middle, top. And then we go to our D chord, middle, bottom, middle, top. And then the C chord, middle, bottom, middle, top. And then the D chord, middle, bottom, middle, top. And we do this all the way up the piano. C chord, middle, bottom, middle, top. D chord, middle, bottom, middle, top. Okay? It's a very simple pattern. Now it's really nice to swing these notes. Long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. Okay? So I do recommend practicing it with the swing notes up the piano. Okay? Now for the chords, if you're a little bit more on the beginner side, I do recommend using a C6 chord. It's basically a C major chord, and you're adding the sixth note from the scale. It's kind of a jazzier way of playing a C chord. And if you have some piano playing experience, okay, you can use a really hip jazz chord called a C6-9. It's E, G, A, and D. Okay, and it's like a C6 chord, except we're adding the ninth to that. All right, so you have two options for the chord. You have the lower chord, and then you've got the C6-9 chord. All right, let's go ahead and play this exercise with the included backing tracks. This lesson comes with 3 different backing tracks at different tempos. Here's the middle tempo at 100 BPM. Here we go. Here it is. Doesn't that sound amazing? Now the 3 backing tracks as well as the lesson sheet music you're seeing on the top left of the screen are downloadable over at pianowithjonny.com. You can also change the key of this entire lesson with the click of one button and practice it in all 12 keys with our smart sheet music. So I'll put a link to all of that below. Now before we move on and I teach you some down patterns, I do recommend that you try some other patterns going up the piano. For example, you could take each of your chords and you could go top, bottom, middle, top on each chord. So D would be top, bottom, middle, top. C would be the same. And then you have D, which is the same. And when you speed it up, you get some really nice patterns. Isn't that beautiful? All right, let's move along, and I want to show you the next step, which is to practice some down patterns. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take each of our chords, C major, D major, and we're going to practice coming down the piano, and we're going to apply a pattern to each of these chords. Now, this pattern we're going to use sounds like this. Doesn't that sound amazing? So here's what we're basically doing. We're taking our C chord and we're going middle, top, bottom, middle. And then we do it on the D chord. Middle, top, bottom, middle. And then the C chord, middle, top, bottom, middle. and then the D chord, middle, top, bottom, middle. And then we continue along to our C chord, middle, top, bottom, middle, and then the D chord, middle, top, bottom, middle, and then we're back to the C chord, okay? This pattern is a little bit more tricky because you really have to think about the fingering, and you kind of need to think ahead. Every time I'm setting up for my new position, I like to put the ring finger on the top note. You see that? All right, let's go ahead and play this one with the backing track, and then I'll teach you how to start using these triad pairs to create a beautiful improvisation. Here it is at 70 BPM. It's at the slower tempo. Here we go. Now, just as we did on the up patterns, on the down patterns, I recommend that you try some of your own patterns. For example, you can take your C chord and you can go top, bottom, middle, top. And then we do it on the D chord, top, bottom, middle, top. And then same thing, top, bottom, middle, top. Doesn't that sound beautiful? So there's lots of really cool patterns that you can play. All right, are you ready to start improvising with this technique? Well, before we do this, if you're enjoying this lesson and you want to do a deep dive on how to solo with different triad pairs and all of the different techniques that I like to use when I'm soloing with this idea, check out the How to Improvise a Solo with the Lydian Scale course over at pianowithjohnny.com. We have a beginner intermediate course and an intermediate advanced course. So I'll put a link to both of those below. All right, let's move along to the final concept, which is how do you actually improvise using triad pairs? Well, step number 3 is to practice connecting your different triad pair patterns. So here's a quick example of how you might do this, and then I'll break down exactly what I'm doing. All right, so what am I doing here? Well, I'm basically starting on a C major chord, and I'm going middle, bottom, middle, top. Then I'm gonna go to a D major chord in first inversion, and I'm gonna go bottom, middle, top, and I'm gonna put an extra F sharp there on the top. Then I'm gonna go to a root position C, and I'm gonna go top, middle, bottom, top, and then end on my F sharp from my D chord. Okay, that's it. That's phrase number 1. So let's go ahead and play this together. C root position, middle, bottom, middle, top. For the top note, I do recommend the thumb. Then we're gonna go first inversion D, bottom, middle, top. I recommend the thumb there, and an additional F sharp there, and then a C chord, top, middle, bottom, top, and then F sharp. Okay, so that's gonna be line number 1. Really nice. Now for our next line, we're gonna start on a first inversion C chord, and we're gonna go top, middle, bottom, and we're gonna shift right away to a D root position, top, middle, bottom, middle, and then we're gonna go to a C chord, but we're gonna skip this C, and we're gonna play it like this. So we're gonna go top, middle, bottom, and then come up a second inversion C chord, and then end on a D. All right, so here's line number 2, coming down a C chord, D chord, C major. All right, doesn't that sound great? Let's go ahead and put these lines together with the backing track, and we're gonna play these at 100 BPM. Here we go. All right, in our final example, I'm gonna improvise one more time with the backing track, and this time I'm gonna take total liberties with these chords. So I want you to listen to what I play, and hopefully it will inspire you to create your own improvisation. All right, here it is with the backing track at 100 BPM. Here we go. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this lesson, be sure to check out pianowithjonny.com. We have over 1,000 step-by-step lessons for all playing levels where you'll learn your favorite songs, styles, and how to improvise at the piano. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.